Richard Walker here with the fourth of my posts looking at the history, background and role of the police in investigating the Jack the Ripper murders of 1888. If you want to visit Jack the Ripper's territory in person, then you can always join one of my Jack the Ripper walks through Whitechapel. A maximum of 12 allowed on any tour, and I use a radio microphone and you get a little radio receiver, and an earpiece, so you won't miss a word of this amazing story. As has been said in earlier posts, the London police in 1888 lacked important advantages that our modern police force enjoys, from fingerprinting to modern forensic science. And if we accept the views of those, like Donald Rumbelow, who believe that the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police were practically at war with each other, then it follows that this lack of cooperation was also a serious handicap. The other problem in investigating the Jack the Ripper murders was the very society in which the police of 1888 had to operate. The divide between rich and poor in London in the 19th century was staggering. Maintaining law and order was not an easy task. Perhaps when Sir Robert Peel got his bill passed through Parliament to create the Metropolitan Police Force, 6 decades before Jack the Ripper made the headlines, his goal was to create a strong but politically neutral police force to maintain social order. It would seem to be a big ask for anybody to be politically neutral when the level of poverty was such that foreign visitors were shocked into recording their views. In The People of the Abyss, Jack London contrasted the lot of the working men in San Francisco or New York with the brutal conditions experienced by the working men of London. He was not alone. An overseas visitor who came from the East was equally appalled. Yiddish theatre actor Jacob Adler was forced out of the Russian Empire, ending up with a successful career in New York, where he wrote about his experiences in London. He wrote, "The further we penetrated into this Whitechapel, the more our hearts sank. Was this London? Never in Russia, nor later in the worst streets of New York, were we to see poverty like the poverty we saw in the London of the 1880s. Robert Peel may well have wanted a politically neutral police force, but the very fact that he had to articulate such a goal with such statements as "the police are the public and the public are the police" shows he was aware that he faced a battle. It could be argued that the social conditions in which police officers operated were a bigger handicap in solving the crimes assigned to Jack the Ripper than the problems caused by the differences between the Metropolitan Police Force and the City of London Police Force. The night of the double event on September 30th, 1888, though, certainly saw a clash between the two police forces. At 1 a.m. on Sunday, September 30th, a woman's body was discovered in an area covered by the H Division of the London Metropolitan Police Force. The body was lying in the entrance to a yard on Berners Street, now called Enrique Street. Her throat had been cut. She was just a 15-minute walk from where Polly Nichols had had her throat cut 1 month earlier in Bucks Row, now called Durwood Street. She was an 18-minute walk from where Annie Chapman had had her throat cut 3 weeks earlier in Hanbury Street. Then, on September 30th, 44 minutes after the discovery in Berners Street, so at 1:44 a.m, a body was discovered in Mitre Square. The throat had also been cut, and was again only an 18-minute walk from the body found just 3/4 of an hour earlier in Berners Street. After the discovery in Berners Street at 1 a.m, local police constables were alerted, and Detective Inspector Reed and Dr. Blackwell arrived at 1:16 by Dr. Blackwell's watch. At 1:30 a.m, Dr. Blackwell was joined by Dr. George Bagster Phillips, who then examined the body. Dr. Phillips was the police surgeon who examined the body of Annie Chapman, who was also murdered in the H Division just 3 weeks earlier. At 1:44, City of London Police Constable Edward Watkins discovered the body of a woman in Mitre Square. At 1:58, City of London Police Detective Constable Daniel House arrived at Mitre Square, shone his light onto the body, and then gave orders for the whole area to be searched. He then headed east to Middlesex Street and Wentworth Street. At 2 a.m, City of London Police Surgeon Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown examined the body at the scene of the crime. At 2:20 a.m, Metropolitan Police Constable Alfred Long passed down Goulston Street. At the same time, City of London Police Detective Constable Daniel House continued his search down Goulston Street. Detective House was not the only City of London police officer searching in the territory of the Metropolitan Police. So perhaps the idea that Jack the Ripper could cross between the two police forces to avoid capture may not be a significant fact in explaining why these crimes were not solved. At 2:55 a.m, Metropolitan Police Constable Alfred Long discovers a piece of cloth in the doorway of the Wentworth model dwellings. It could be asked why a disgusting rag, covered in blood and fecal matter, lying among the grime of London's East End, should be of interest to anyone. Police Constable Alfred Long came across this rag at 2:55 a.m, which is nearly 2 hours after the discovery of the murder, less than 20 minutes away in Berners Street. So PC Long, we can assume, would have received the information about it and would be on the alert for any clue. The piece of cloth had blood on it, and above it was a chalk message: "The Jews are the men who will not be blamed for nothing." This was enough for him to quickly check out the stairway before going to the Commercial Street Police Station, where he handed in the cloth to be examined. He explained that he'd left another police officer at the Wentworth model dwellings to check anyone entering or leaving. The piece of cloth that this Metropolitan Police officer had found matched a piece missing from the apron of the woman who had just been murdered in Mitre Square, in the City of London Police District. City of London Police Detective Daniel House, giving evidence at the inquest, said, "When I saw the dead woman at the mortuary, I noticed that a piece of her apron was missing. When I got back to Mitre Square, I heard that a piece of apron had been found in Goulston Street. I went there with Detective Hunt to the spot where the apron had been discovered. There I saw some chalk writing on the wall. I stayed, and I sent Hunt to find Mr. McWilliam." Again, we have a number of City of London police officers crossing the border into Metropolitan Police territory. Metropolitan Police Superintendent Arnold also arrived, and 5 weeks later, writing in a report on November 6th, he wrote, "On the 30th of September, on hearing of the Berners Street murder, after visiting Commercial Street Police Station, I arrived at Lehman Street Police Station shortly before 5 a.m, and ascertained from Superintendent Arnold all that was known there relative to the two murders. The most pressing question at that moment was some writing on the wall in Goulston Street, evidently written with the intention of inflaming the public mind against the Jews, at which Mr. Arnold, with a view to preventing serious disorder, proposed to obliterate, and had sent down an inspector with a sponge for that purpose, telling him to await his arrival. I considered it desirable that I should decide the matter myself, as it was one involving so great a responsibility whether any action was taken or not. I accordingly went down to Goulston Street at once, before going to the scene of the murder. It was just getting light. The public would be in the streets in a few minutes. In a neighbourhood very much crowded on Sunday mornings by Jewish vendors and Christian purchasers from all parts of London. There were several police around on the spot when I arrived, both Metropolitan Police officers and City Police officers. The writing was on the jamb of the open archway or doorway, visible in the street, and could not be covered up without danger of the covering being torn off at once. A discussion took place on whether the writing could be left covered up, or otherwise, or whether any portion of it could be left for an hour until it could be photographed. But after taking into consideration the excited state of the population in London generally at the time, the strong feeling which had been excited against the Jews, and the fact that in a short time there would be a large concourse of the people in the streets, and having before me the report that if it was left there, the house was likely to be wrecked, in which from my own observation I entirely concurred, I considered it desirable to obliterate the writing at once, having taken a copy of which I enclose a duplicate. And having been to the scene of the murder, I went on to the City Police office and informed the Chief Superintendent of the reason why the writing had been obliterated. This was a major clash between two very different views of the action that was taken. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner's view that the message had to be removed to avoid a riot, and the view held by senior City of London police officers who believed that important evidence had been deliberately destroyed. This clash is often held up as an example of the conflict that existed between the two London police forces. It does appear, though, to be caused more by a difference of opinion as to the best course of action, rather than a systemic failure brought about by competition between the two police forces. It should be noted that commentators on the events writing more recently are equally divided. Some support and some condemn the action taken by the Metropolitan Police in washing off the writing at 5:30 a.m. Had Superintendent Arnold and Commissioner Sir Charles Warren arrived and demanded to know what the City of London Police thought they were doing, interfering on Metropolitan Police territory, then we could say a lack of cooperation between the two police forces could well have had an adverse effect on the investigation into these crimes. But there is evidence that shows whatever happened in the early hours of Sunday morning in Goulston Street, cooperation existed. The statement by Sir Charles Warren, "I went on to the City Police office and informed the Chief Superintendent of the reason why the writing had been obliterated," shows that a degree of professional cooperation existed. At 2:30 on that Sunday afternoon, Dr. George Bagster Phillips of the Metropolitan Police joined the City of London Police Surgeon, Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown, to perform the autopsy at the City Mortuary in Golden Lane. Now, Dr. Brown was the City of London Police's police surgeon, and the victim he was examining was murdered in the City of London. But Dr. Phillips, who was a Metropolitan Police police surgeon, was in attendance at that autopsy. So cooperation between the two police forces was not completely absent. There were, however, issues with the way both police forces dealt with the investigation into these two murders that were not ideal. Issues to be looked at in the next post. Thank you for checking out this post, and I hope I'll get to meet you one day on my Jack the Ripper walk through Whitechapel.